Okay, I think I've got his attention now. I'll do my best to tank the damage. If you guys can start hitting him from behind. If you're shooting from behind, shoot from behind. Okay, looks like he's spawning more the Lost. Oh, that was quite a big hit. Okay, I'm going to need heals on me, I think. Okay, let's try and just keep his attention, keep the aggro on me. Thank you, healer. That is very much appreciated. Hi guys, what is going on? And welcome back to another video on Amazon's New World. So, I have recently been lucky enough to get invited by the guys over at Amazon to come and check out one of the new expeditions they have recently introduced into the game's alpha. But even better than that, they were kind enough to actually allow me to record it, as the normal alpha is still very much under NDA. And with the closed beta coming up on the 20th of July and full release due on the 31st of August, I'm sure quite a few of you are going to be curious to see kind of what the state of the game is now. How has it changed, what has been added, and what has evolved since we last got to test out during the preview event last year. You know, of course, we're not going to be able to test out everything in the couple of hours that we actually got in game. But hopefully, I can actually start to give you a little bit of a decent idea of how the combat system feels now. Plus, give you a bit of footage of some of the new weapons that have been added into the game. You know, things like we've had like the Ice Gauntlet that was added very recently, as well as the Great Axe and some of the other weapons like that. Initially, my impressions have been really overwhelmingly positive. I've said this, I know, in previous videos, but for me, one of the biggest failures of the game at the time of the preview event last year was the lack of content, particularly around the mid to the late game. And the fact that they've actually listened to this criticism and introduced new features such as the expedition that I've actually been playing is a really good sign. But putting that and putting the new weapons to one side for a moment, I kind of want to touch on briefly, how does the combat itself actually feel? You know, what does it actually like to play? It is very much based on the same system that we got to play last year, and it doesn't at its core feel radically different from that, although I think it does feel significantly improved. I feel like this most comes to light in solo combat though, like this clip here, where I feel the more dynamic parts of block, dodging and timing abilities and attacks are far more important to winning the fight, and I think this is where the combat system really starts to excel. It's really where it shines for me. Because as soon as you start to get into those larger group fights, I find myself losing the sort of more nuanced elements, just spamming attack and making use of my abilities just as soon as they come off cooldown. Although, having said that, I do think in the larger group fights and expeditions like this one we've been going through, most of the group fighting, I think you see a stronger emphasis on roles starting to come to light. For example, whilst running through this Amrine Excavation, you know, a healer was absolutely essential for keeping the group alive, you know, particularly during those bigger boss fights because the damage output is so high. I'd also like to think that I did at least perhaps a half-decent job, some of the time, of being a tank and trying to keep the main boss focused on me so that I could be the one absorbing the damage. And there's weapons and equipment that can be focused towards this. For example, you can get shields to increase your threat level, so effectively the enemies will hold and focus on you. A few of the group decided to go focused on DPS, so they'll be able to take the enemies down more quickly. So, yes, you do lose a part of the combat in group fights, but I think you gain much more group dynamic. Plus, there's an element of me that just found it fun to be part of a group. Now, as I mentioned at the start, there have also been quite a lot of new weapons added into the game now since we all last got to play, with rapiers, ice gauntlets, great axes and spears all making an appearance, and I don't doubt that we'll be seeing more weapons introduced soon enough. They've also done a full skill mastery tree rework not too long ago on each of the weapons, so that's also mixed things up quite a little bit since we all last played in August last year. But for this test, I mostly wanted to focus on Sword and Shield and Great Axe, but did get a little bit of time to test out some of the other stuff like the Ice Gauntlet, which is pretty awesome to actually be able to get to put to use, since I'd only actually seen the images of it over on Twitter. So what about the expedition itself? Was it enjoyable? How was it set out? In short, yes, it was pretty well, quite enjoyable. It took around 20 or 30 minutes or something like that to run the whole event, which consisted of not one, but two bosses, the last of which certainly took some killing, particularly as two of our group were unlucky enough to get pinned down and killed by the boss halfway through, meaning we had to finish it off with just 3 players, which certainly made it a challenge, even though we were 5 levels up. I found there were a pretty decent number of challenges and puzzles along the way, through the expedition, which, along with the level design, was really actually quite cool and made it enjoyable. I also really enjoyed some of the more hidden features and some of the smaller elements. For example, whilst I was exploring more thoroughly around the base of one of the expedition rooms, I found a little miniature loot chest hidden far out of the way at the back under a waterfall. I mean, there's no way you would normally find that unless you go out of your way to actually explore. It actually kind of gave me massive Oblivion flashbacks to exploring some of the caves and dungeons in that game, because they used to love hiding, chests and objects in obscure places. It's just little things, and I know it doesn't really impact the main gameplay, but little things like that really make me enjoy a game. They really add to the immersion aspect of it. I also enjoyed just some of the different creature variety. There's a pretty decent mix of different stuff through the expedition, and I'm expecting that, I guess, different expeditions are going to have sort of different creatures in them. This one's mostly focused on the Lost, which is why it's got a lot of undead and stuff like that in it. But one thing that I didn't realise, and I'm not quite sure why I just randomly attacked the fresh air there, obviously slightly missed that ability, but one thing I didn't realise is that you have to actually push through in certain sections. If you see at the back there's that nest, and whilst I'm busy fighting these guys here, one of the teammates has actually realised and pushed onto the nest, because until you destroy that nest, until you take that down, the enemy are going to keep respawning. So you actually have to push through, fight through them to get onto their effectively base point, clear that out and actually take it out to be able to kill them and clear that section. But I probably had most fun fighting the final boss. By this point, we'd already lost 2 of our team, who, once he got killed, unfortunately got locked behind the gate in the expedition room. So unless we all died and reset, then we wouldn't be able to get back in. But since we were so close to finishing off the boss, the 3 of us decided to try and fight on and take it out. And it was certainly a pretty close thing at times. I mean, thank goodness we had one of the Amazon dev team with us who was a pretty fantastic healer. And she managed to keep me in the fight pretty much the whole time. And we were really able to tackle Simon Gray and sort of keep him in. I was really trying to hold aggression throughout the end of this. Because I got my shield, I could block a really good chunk of the damage. Although every time the healer was using their staff, they were generating a threat, which is sort of almost drawing the boss towards them. But we were sort of just about able to keep things in the fight, keep the damage up. The rest of the team was sort of combined healing me, applying damage, and trying to keep some of the undead away from me too much, because those little guys were almost as much of a problem as the main boss himself. And then over time, as we started to get closer and closer, I made one sort of last dash for the finish, and we were able to secure the kill and win the expedition. It was really nice, and there was some really decent loot along the way as well, which made it enjoyable. And yeah, certainly a proper fight there at the end. So I guess it's worth trying to draw some sort of summary of my experiences in game so far, and kind of how I've been finding it. I think overall it's definitely massively positive. I think the game is certainly taking steps in the right direction when compared to the preview event last year, and the speed and progress of updates has certainly been pretty impressive. However, I guess I'm only getting to test and show you all a very limited part of the game here. There's still huge amounts of stuff with crafting, questing, PvP, territory wars, guilds, etc. that I haven't got any footage for and haven't been able to show you. My point being, this video only gives you a limited, a small indication of what the game is all about. It certainly isn't a game without its flaws. For example, I kind of wish that magic and healing produced less of a aura, is that the right word? The sort of green haze around your character. For me, it kind of detracts from the visuals, and I find it quite annoying. I also wish the combat in the larger fights was slightly less spammy. I guess kind of as we mentioned earlier on in the video though, this is slightly made up for by the group roles. But yeah, I wish the individual combat in group fights felt slightly better. Either way, I'm certainly looking forward to exploring more of the game when beta hits. And we are certainly going to be doing a lot more videos in the lead up to beta, because I'm certainly really excited to be playing. If you have any questions about the expedition you've seen so far today though, do let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'll answer any questions I can, so long as they're sort of accessible under the NDA. And of course, subscribe to the channel, because we're going to be having a lot more New World content going forwards. Anyway, thank you for watching guys, hopefully you've enjoyed it, and I shall see you all on the next video.